Qui est le showrunner de Line of Duty et qui est le producteur et auteur de l'ensemble des 6 épisodes qu'il a écrit tout seul de Line of Duty, et Simon Heath, qui est lui le coproducteur de la série, et qui ont écrit en tout cas ce pilote, et ils en sont à la saison 2. Je vais commencer par... D'abord, c'est la première fois que je vois un show avec un homme politique français à l'écran, c'est Olivier Besancenot. Je ne sais pas si vous avez remarqué la ressemblance, je l'aurais dit tout à l'heure, la ressemblance entre Steve Arnott, qui est le DC Arnott qui joue, et Olivier, notre extrême gauchiste français favori. J'ai une première question, Jed et Simon, c'est comment vous avez fait pour rendre une série sur des flics corrompus à la BBC et en mettant un blowjob dans le premier épisode?
The BBC were a little bit apprehensive about the show. There hadn't been a show on British television for about 10 years that dealt with police corruption, and they were very concerned that the show might upset the police and distract them from solving crimes, and that they would be so distracted from solving crimes that they would try and get the show off the air. We were very lucky that this didn't happen. But before the show became a success, we were under quite a lot of pressure not to relate our stories to any real events. And obviously this is quite difficult because police officers are often doing things they shouldn't do, and you can always...
Not in France.
Yes, it's a unique British problem, clearly. And the main effect on the show was that we didn't get any cooperation from the police in the making of the show, so it became very difficult to do the research and to have we ended up having secret meetings anonymously with police officers and learning from them how the anti-corruption units worked. But generally, our way of dealing with these issues was that we had to fictionalise the units that deal with anti-corruption. We had to disguise any mention of which city the show was set in, disguise any references to real police procedures, and we had to largely invent our own way of this unit operating.
Et à partir de quel moment la BBC a greenlighté le projet? Qu'est-ce que vous avez donné comme matériau, comme script à la BBC pour qu'elle donne le feu vert sur la mise en production du projet?
The series was greenlit off the pilot script, which I know will probably make French writers very envious, but that is the way it works in British television. The script only went through 2 or 3 drafts before it went to the head of drama at the BBC, and he liked the show and he liked the idea of the show. But it took a further year before the BBC committed to making the programme. But once that decision came, then we had to write the remaining scripts and work towards a delivery date that was given to it.
Closer.
Okay. Yes, the show was greenlit off just one script, and we had to wait about another year from delivery of that script until the BBC asked us to commit to a production schedule.
Et est-ce que ça a fait une grande différence pour la BBC et pour votre travail à tous les deux que toi, Jed, tu sois à la fois l'auteur et le producteur de la série? Est-ce que c'est quelque chose de fréquent en Angleterre? Et est-ce que dans ton cas, dans le cas de Line of Duty, tu estimes que c'était quelque chose qu'il était absolument obligatoire de faire pour réussir la série que tu avais envie de faire?
Well, I think it's necessary, but I'm not sure anyone else does. No, I think that it's something I enjoy doing, and I've been grateful for the support of the production company and from the BBC. But it's not a common situation in British television. In fact, there are very few writers who create series who then showrun them. But probably it's something that the people around me have to adjust to, and I think maybe Simon could give a better perspective than I could on that.
It's easy to work with a writer, with also the producer, and not the director, but maybe a little.
I think it's just a different working method, and ultimately, when you're an exec producer of a show, you're looking at the scripts for a long time, and then you're looking at the rushes. And doing the show this way, Jed writing it and producing it, what I was reading and then what I was seeing were much closer together than they had been on some shows I've made before. So that, immediately you can see a huge advantage to that. I think traditionally in the UK, dramas made with that very clear separation of powers. The writer is left over there, hands the script in, and then the director takes possession with the producer, and at times the writer then gets completely shut out of that process. I like to think as a company, even though we haven't worked quite this way before, we've always tried to embrace the writer at the centre of the process, because I think you get better results that way. And then, the BBC were very happy and open to that way of doing things. And I think it's kind of led the way a bit, and there's a show, a series that I suspect we'll be looking at next year that's just been on UK TV called Fall, where the writer Alan Cubitt occupied a very similar role to Jed, and again that show's been a big success for BBC.
Je vous conseille d'ailleurs de regarder les 5 autres épisodes qui sont absolument géniaux, enfin, en tout cas qui ménagent pas mal de surprises.
How does that affect the relationship?
The relationship between you and the directors, we talked about a few minutes ago. Est-ce que tu es sur le plateau? Comment tu travailles avec les réalisateurs? Et quelle est ta place par rapport aux réalisateurs sur un plateau? Parce que tu sais bien que c'est un problème français dont on a parlé tout à l'heure.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, and I can answer it from a little bit of experience, because I'm currently developing a show with Quel, and in respect of that development process, a director was brought on much earlier in the development period than would normally occur on one of the shows that I would be developing in the UK. Generally, the way it works in the UK is that the show would be greenlit based on the script, based on the vision that is written in the script, and then a director would be brought in to serve that vision. That doesn't mean that the director then doesn't have input. In fact, the directors have a great deal of input, and I think that I want to be permissive of that in order to improve the scripts. And when directors come back and say, this scene doesn't work, or this could be better, or you've missed a bit out, or whatever it is, then I'm really grateful for that, because it makes me look better. But the process is one which is led by the showrunner. Ultimately, I will make the decisions about whether the direction of the show is being achieved, and whether the script is being realised in the correct way, whether the performances are what we all want them to be. That is different from working with a director who maybe is used to having much more power and working with greater freedom. But you have to navigate through that relationship, and that happens in pre-production. That I form a working relationship with a director where the director he hasn't shot anything, or she hasn't shot anything, so I'm not really in a position to criticise them. Whereas they're in a very strong position to criticise the script, and I'm very open to that. So the way that the relationship starts is with me serving the process and being very giving to that process and amenable to discussion. So therefore, when we get on set, I feel that I do have the moral high ground, and I'm able to suggest to directors that things could be done slightly differently, or shots could be added, and one would hope that the spirit of collaboration continues.
You suggest. Tu suggères seulement aux metteurs en scène.
Yeah, I like to talk to directors in the way that I'd like them to talk to me. So generally, I try to be very polite and respectful, and obviously sometimes you're under time pressure, and sometimes you have to be more direct than trying to lead them to a change in scene. Sometimes you just have to offer up what you think should happen next. But generally, that's quite rare. And certainly in the first week of shooting, all I'm really talking to directors about is the style of the show, where the characters have come from previous episodes, how the episodes are fitting together, how the HODs, the heads of department, like to work, and just helping them through that process. And once we've got through that first week, then we're very close collaborators in terms of building the parts of the puzzle.
Alors je disais tout à l'heure que tu as écrit seul les 6 premiers épisodes de Line of Duty. En combien de temps tu les as écrits et avec qui tu as travaillé, avec quel retour tu avais? Est-ce que c'est avec Simon, est-ce que c'est avec la BBC que tu as pu travailler aussi rapidement et mettre à disposition, enfin rapidement, dis-moi en combien de temps tu as écrit les 6 premiers avant de tourner?
I didn't think it was particularly quick, but it was maybe 6 or 7 months. But then the writing process continues when we start shooting, and it's just really important to keep the speed up and to be delivering outlines and delivering the scripts quickly, so that once we get into production, people are aware of what we need to be doing, and they can do their preparations. The way I write Line of Duty is quite unique, I think, which is that I make it up as I go along. So I really don't know what's going to happen next. I have a vague idea what might happen in the next episode or at the end. But I just start with that first episode. I really didn't have many ideas what would happen after that, and when we were waiting for the series to be green lit, I wasn't working on other episodes, I wasn't outlining other episodes. We just went on to the next episode and picked up the story, and the way that worked was I wrote an outline which I delivered to Simon and to the script editor, and they had a meeting with me where they told me bits they liked, bits they didn't like, bits they didn't get, bits they thought could be better. And then I went away and wrote the script. And we worked like that in sequence from episode to episode until we got to the last episode, and then I had to figure out how it would all end. But in terms of how that process worked, it might be interesting to get a bit better perspective on it from Simon.
Yeah, I think it was fairly unique for me because I was used to a situation where you perhaps storyline the entire series up front, and there's a nice security blanket about that when you're producing or executive producing.
You have to trust him very much.
But actually, sometimes you watch series and you see the dead hand of storylining all over it, that it all fits neatly together, but ultimately is a bit predictable. what happened with this method was that we would continue to get into end of episodes, and myself and Kirsty, the script editor, would be scratching our heads thinking, well, how do we get out of this corner? How do we navigate our way around this kind of narrative wall that we seem to have put up in front of the story? But that was a very exciting way, I think, of doing it, and leads to a show, and you just alluded to it, that I think is full of surprises. Because the narrative isn't preordained, you're more surprised in terms of the turns that it takes as the series progresses. And it just means, occasionally we do something in, I don't know, episode 3, and we'd have to reverse engineer some of that back into the first couple of episodes, but that was fine, because the momentum going forward was great enough that we were never in danger of missing our key deadlines, which was entering into production. I think we entered into production with at least 3 scripts done, and I think possibly we had drafts of 2 more as well. So we were in very good shape. There's plenty of shows going to prep. I'm sure it's the same here with only 1 or 2 scripts ready. So we began to trust that process and embrace that process, and it felt like a really great way of doing it.
I would say that Simon hasn't said that sometimes I would just not write what was agreed in the outline. There were times when I kind of got a bit through the script and thought, this isn't working, it's dull, I'm going to kill a character. And then I'd be very excited because I'd think it was a surprise, and if it was a surprise to me, having just written it, then it might be a surprise to the audience. So there were times when I think they started to get worried about how the story was going to work out, when key characters were vanishing, or when things that we believed were true turned out to be false. But
I do remember one occasion saying, we've got to make 5 hours of this, and we're burning through story at a very rapid rate of knots.
Yeah, but I think that ended up creating a real sense that the story was happening in the way that the audience would experience it. Because we were creating it the way the audience would watch it, which was, we don't really know what's going to happen next, and we don't have any firm plans for the next episode. So the episode has to stand up on its own terms. It has to be an artistically successful and entertaining 1 hour of drama. And you don't know whether an audience is going to come back next week. You really don't. So all you can do is do the best job while you've got them watching, and hope if you do a good job, they'll come back next week, they'll tell their friends to come back next week, and that's what happened with the show. Whether it was the method of writing that achieved that is hard to say, but certainly I enjoyed the process so much. That's exactly what I've done with the second series, and have continued just to make it up as I go along. And there have been times when I've got a bit carried away and killed the main character, and then had to unkill them when there was nothing, when the story ran out of opportunities to move forward. But all in all, we find that process amusing rather than concerning.
Yeah, I mean, what's great is we sit and we talk about quite a detailed outline with Jed, and then Jed goes away to write a first draft. But when you open it on your laptop and start reading, that it may not bear a great deal of resemblance to the outline you've all sat around and discussed. But that's exciting. There's nothing worse than reading the first draft of the script, kind of having storyline and outlining to death, and knowing every single beat that's coming. And it translates, I think, into mediocre drama.
Yeah, I think that script writing is different from outlining. I think they're different skills, and I think that you can become obsessed about the outlines. But the reason that as writers we're forced to become obsessed about outlines is that they are demanded of us by the networks. The networks require all kinds of reassurances about content. And I do appreciate that I'm in a very fortunate position on Line of Duty that those reassurances don't appear to be required.
I have to say, in that sense, we negotiated a position for ourselves with the BBC where they were prepared to wait until we had drafts that were very well advanced. They weren't asking to see storylines, they weren't asking to see outlines, they weren't even asking to see the first drafts of the scripts. we just choose the moment where we thought that it was all firmly enough in place that you know, they could start pulling the bricks down.
Mais vous avez bien conscience tous les deux que là vous racontez ce que n'importe quel scénariste adorerait vivre, François ailleurs, c'est-à-dire de dire à la chaîne on vous rend quand on est prêt, de dire à la chaîne on écrit mieux en suivant nos impulsions et en suivant une narration qu'on n'a pas forcément complètement travaillée et construite en amont, qu'on n'est pas obligé de mettre des post-it partout sur le mur avec une arche narrative sur 12 épisodes et que tout ne fonctionne pas comme ça. Je reviens sur la première demande de la BBC. Quand vous êtes arrivé les voir avec ce projet, on est sur le service public anglais, quelle a été leur première réaction, étant donné le sujet et le côté dark de la série et de vos personnages, sachant que vous alliez sur le service public?
Well, I think that that's something that you have to set aside and just work on the show. I know that the way the BBC is funded is obviously very particular to how people feel about it in Britain. There are sections of the press that do like to write stories about criticising the BBC because they feel that they fund it directly based on a system of taxation. But as program makers, you are not part of that process. You take a project to the BBC in the same way that you take a project to a commercial network. And ultimately, it's about engaging the commissioners and the network executives with the vision you have for the show. Beyond that, I think that you hope that if there are criticisms and there are the issues that have been discussed, that somebody else deals with it.
I think we were fortunate at the moment we were pitching Line of Duty. There was suddenly a great deal more of investment in drama on BBC Two. BBC Two, in terms of simplification, BBC One is a big mainstream network channel. BBC Two is much more like a cable channel, you know, a Showtime if you like, you know, perhaps not as edgy as that, but there's an ambition to do non-mainstream drama. Now, knowing that there was suddenly a home being created on the BBC for the kind of drama we wanted to make was really, really helpful. If we'd had to try and get the show onto BBC One, I think it would have been a non-starter ultimately. It certainly wouldn't resemble.
Although that was a possibility at one stage, that the show was well regarded as a script within the BBC, and there was at one point a possibility being explored of it being on BBC One on a mass appeal channel. But I think that it going on more of a boutique channel has helped us. It's given us greater creative freedom. And actually, we are the biggest hit drama on that channel, which is a very good place to be. If we were on BBC One, then I don't think there's any chance that we would be one of their biggest hits. We might well be a poor relation in comparison to other shows, and ultimately we might not have as many seasons of Line of Duty as we're hoping to have on BBC Two.
Et est-ce que le fait d'être en termes de financement entre BBC One et BBC Two, quel a été le coût par épisode que BBC Two a pu vous donner? Est-ce que c'était suffisant? Est-ce que vous avez estimé que vous avez pu avoir ce que vous voulez en étant sur BBC Two? Quel était le coût de l'épisode? Est-ce que ça vous a permis d'aller au bout de ce que vous vouliez dès le départ?
The budget was around €900,000 per hour. We're not allowed to discuss budgets, that's a BBC rule, but we're in France now, so that doesn't matter.
No one's going to tell.
Yeah, it's just between us. The answer to that is that you always want more money. You always want to do bigger car chases and more spectacular stunts. But the biggest problem with a television budget is how quickly you have to shoot. How many days you have to generate an hour of television, and you're always rushed. We did not have enough time to shoot the show, and that meant that there were days when we had 2 units running. The director would be directing one unit, I'd be directing another unit. And sometimes we'd actually just pass each other on the street and wave, and we were off with our different cameras and just having to add extra days but not being able to afford to extend the shoot. So the one thing that a lot of money gets you is time. And it also probably gives you the ability to reshoot more. You know, one of the things that I always say to directors is that you only really know how to shoot something after you've shot it. And there were times when we had to go back and reshoot things or pick up more shots. And that's always a strain on a schedule. But as the producer who used to run World Productions, a very eminent and respected producer in the UK, Tony Garnett, often says that with the bigger budget comes less creative freedom. The more that a network invests in a show, the more accountability there is financially, and the fewer risks you're permitted to take. So if you actually want enormous amounts of creative freedom, you need to have a low budget. And actually the reason I got started in TV was that the show, I was a brand new writer, I'd never written for television at all, and I got to write a whole series that was on BBC One. And the only real reason I got that opportunity was because it was the cheapest show that they'd ever made.
It's true.
Cardiac arrest. So it was a medical drama that we made in nearly 20 years ago now.
I think, just to pick up on your points, BBC Two and BBC One funding are roughly the same. You might get a little bit more for BBC One. You might get a bit of cast breakage on BBC One for a big star name possibly, but generally they are more even than they maybe were sort of historically. Also, picking up on something, I think we had a very good team in Birmingham that made very good use of those resources. Because we were to shoot each episode in 12 days, which for 60 minutes, that's a lot, particularly given some of the conditions we were shooting some of those scenes under. And I was struck watching episode 1 by, the amount of stuff that we picked up shots or added new material after Jed had viewed a cut and felt that we were missing a scene, and then gone and written it and then we shot it. And it was such a liberating way of doing a first episode. Because so often you get the first episode and you realise by the time you're there in the edit and you've cut it a couple of times that there's something missing, and if you picked it up at script stage, well, we were able to write new material, pick up shots and reshoot certain scenes that weren't quite working. And we managed to somehow, with an excellent line producer, to get all that within this schedule.
I mean, that was something that I'd started to do on a previous show that I showrun, a medical drama called Bodies, and on that we had to do quite a lot of reshooting because there were problems with that show, and psychologically that was a big problem for some people. I had to work very hard on that show to persuade the line producer and the broadcaster, the network, that it was the right thing to do and to go back, and without spending any more money, actually just being creative with the schedule and doing targeted script rewrites. And that's something that I've kind of continued to do quite a lot. I know that on some shoots people feel that it's incredibly negative to go back and pick up more material or to reshoot. They feel it's actually in some way psychologically damaging. But I actually don't have a problem with it, and I do encourage the directors and the cast to come to me if there are things they're not happy with, and they do often ask for opportunities to go back and reshoot material or add material.
How many days an episode?
12.
12.
Is there?
With your shoot?
And can you tell us a little bit about the scheduling? Wait, you shoot one episode and then you shoot another episode, or you shoot an episode and edit and then
No, we shoot in blocks, and we shoot in blocks of 3 episodes at a time. So we do pre-production on 3 episodes. We shoot 3 with favourable scheduling, so that we have economies of scale with respect to locations and cast. And then during the shooting of 3 episodes, we then embark on pre-production on the next 3 episodes. And post-production on the first 3 will continue during the principal photography on the second 3.
So it's like you're shooting a 3-hour movie in
Yeah.
36 days.
Yes.
Okay. Well done.
J'ai une question. Juste une question sur le format. Est-ce que le format de 6 fois 50, enfin 6 fois 1 heure, vous a été imposé par BBC Tout? Est-ce que c'était ton choix au départ de développer cette histoire sur 6 épisodes en saison 1? Et est-ce que c'est un format qui se vend à l'étranger aujourd'hui, un peu partout ou pas?
The format of the show was something that was part of the pitch to the network. That one of the issues you have in television is that it's very hard to get the most famous, the most sought-after actors to commit to returning series. I make returning series, and I love returning series. It's what I want to do, and it was part of the effort to figure out a solution to this problem that led me to the format of Line of Duty, which is that you create a role which is effectively the lead role in the series, and that character's story finishes at the end of the first series, so the actor is only committing to do 1 series, is only committing to a few months of work, and then they return to their movie career, or in the case of Lenny James, he returns to the United States, which is where he gets most of his work. But the returning characters are the supporting characters. The investigators are the ones who return in the 2nd season, and they investigate a whole new case with another larger-than-life, vivid, exciting character who's played by a very sought-after actor. And when we pitched this idea to the BBC, they were really excited by the idea of casting some young, up-and-coming talent to be the returning characters, and bringing in the kind of actors that they normally find hard to get to do returning series, to play the cop under investigation, the antagonist in the story. And that, I suppose, is what is a unique part of the format, which is that the guest character, the antagonist, has more dramatic space and more dramatic development than the returning characters. And this is something that we think is incredibly portable as a format, because everybody wants a drama to cut through, and the face of a drama is the cast. And we're in discussion with the Americans about doing an American version of the show, and one of the things that they've really responded to is that if we do this show for cable, then they can bring in someone who's effectively a movie star to do the first season, their story finishes, and then in the 2nd season they bring in another movie star. And from the writing viewpoint, it's also very liberating, because you can take a character to the limit. You don't have to keep a character in some kind of equilibrium so that they're in good shape to come back next series and just do the same things all over again. you can actually take that character to the limit of what that character is capable of.
Je peux poser une question? Oui, je suis venu parce que je suis un grand fan de Bodies, qui est vraiment une série excellente. Celle-là a l'air très très bien. Alors j'avais en fait deux questions. La première question, c'est vous avez parlé de problèmes avec Bodies, lesquels? Est-ce que ça vous a porté préjudice de faire Bodies et ensuite de faire Line of Duty? Et la deuxième question, c'est vous êtes intéressé par les services publics, donc NHS, ensuite la police, vous faites l'éducation après?
To answer the last question first, no, I'm not developing any idea set in education. I'm very happy doing a police series, and it's I think that it's no accident that the police drama is popular all over the world, because it is a situation where characters are placed in everyday jeopardy. What they do appears to be important. And there are just exciting opportunities that you don't get in other kinds of precinct drama. In respect of Bodies, thank you for your compliments about it. The problems with the show at the beginning were that it didn't look like the script, and everybody had signed up to that, and I just felt that the material that was being shot needed to more closely resemble the vision for the series, so we had to take steps to do that, and we succeeded.
Juste une question, Jed. Quelles ont été tes influences sur Line of Duty, si influence il y a eu? De quel type de série, ou quel type d'univers ou de couleur, quelles influences t'ont amené à faire Line of Duty?
My biggest influence on the show was probably The Shield. I don't know what whether you have that show here or what it's called, but that's the number one influence. And the other show that was a large influence was Engrenage. I'm a big fan of the show, and I really like the look of it. And so when we started to meet with, once we'd appointed a director and a cinematographer, I showed them material from Engrenage to explain how I wanted the show to look. And I think basically I just kept saying bleu, bleu. Rather than talking about anything more sophisticated than that just having a very blue look and a dusky feel to the cinematography worked very well, and also kind of making the characters quite grungy. That was another thing I like about the show, and the way that nobody's all bad and nobody's all good, and they work within a system, and the system makes people cynical. Those were all very influential, and I think that there are great similarities between The Shield and Engrenage and Line of Duty.
Pardon? J'aurais une question. Voilà, je suis scénariste, et la façon, enfin, quand vous racontez la façon dont la série s'est créée, puis vos relations avec la chaîne, pour nous, ça ressemble à un conte de fées. En France, on a besoin de faire valider les textes à tous les niveaux, synopsis, séquencier, dialogue, les chaînes interviennent tout le temps. Apparemment, pour vous, ça a été très différent. Et alors, quand est-ce que les chaînes sont intervenues dans votre travail? Parce qu'apparemment, vous avez été très libre, et donc il a bien fallu un moment où elles ont dû valider ce que vous faisiez. À quel point vous avez été libre? Comment ça s'est passé?
Well, as I said, I'm working on a project with Canal Plus, so I really understand what you're saying. I think I was just very lucky to be in a situation where the material that was delivered worked for the network. That the first script didn't require a lot of notes in their opinion. I think if the script had gone to another network, a different editorial team, I might not have been quite so lucky, but I certainly wouldn't change that. And beyond that, the fact that the series was a hit made all the difference. If I worked on series that I thought were very good, and a lot of people who worked on them and commissioned them agree. Bodies being an example, and you know, Bodies was an award-winning series, but it didn't get as big an audience as Line of Duty, and therefore every time the Bodies was recommissioned, there was a request for editorial changes, and sometimes that was quite difficult to deal with. That sometimes there were notes that were trying to change the identity of the show, and I've been through that many times as a writer working in television. It's a horrible situation. I have huge sympathy for any writer who goes through it. I have huge sympathy for French screenwriters who are going through that process in French television. And I don't really know what the answer to it is, apart from being able to choose who you work with. And unfortunately, because there aren't so many different networks, so many different places you can take your work, that you are often in a situation where the people you are working with are out of your control, and sometimes you're very unlucky, and they don't understand the show. They give you notes that challenge the identity of the show, that make you angry and upset, and make you want to just throw them out of the window into that cemetery you can see out of the window. And other times it's, you know, you have a very good experience. All I can say is that you've got to kind of try and fight for your work. If you think that the notes you're getting are harming the show, I think you've got to find diplomatic ways of dealing with that. I was quite lucky on Bodies, although it was a tougher experience with the network. My executive producer on that was kind of quite hot-headed and would often get into big arguments with them. So I always appeared like the reasonable guy who was trying to please everybody, and that meant that I could try and propose solutions that just stopped the fighting, and when actually I was just secretly getting my own way. On Line of Duty, we honestly don't have that situation. The only area in which the network are very, very concerned is casting. That is something that they take a very deep interest in, and they have the final say on that. We can offer casting suggestions, but it's their decision ultimately.
I think that the two other things worth adding to that. The first is that I sensed going in with different shows over the last 5 or 6 years that there's been, certainly in the BBC, a shift, which is that whilst the development process will always be the development process, and it's long, and you can end up doing many drafts and reversions of shows, that the point at which they commit to a show, they commit to a show, and they're more handing it over to the creatives to then make the show, which I think is a sensible approach. If the show then doesn't work, the creatives take the responsibility. Whereas I've always thought that if you're a commissioner and you're meddling all the way through and then the show doesn't work, you become culpable. So,
well, hang on though. That's true, you would think, but actually it's amazing how they still walk away and blame the creatives. True.
And so I think we benefited from that. I think you have to say that Jed, as a writer with his track record, the shows he's made, had earned the right to be able to make the show that he wanted to make. I think we, as a company, have made some decent shows, so they kind of trusted us. And again, I think we brought them a cop show at a point where they wanted a realistic cop show that interrogated what the cops were about, rather than just a soft sort of detective show. So all those things I think came together. Obviously, if if we fucked it up, or if it bombed in the ratings, then we probably wouldn't be sat here now, and everything might look very different. But you know, having had a successful first series, it validates the approach they took. We look great in their eyes, and they leave us then to get on with the second series, largely.
I'm not sure what you can, now that we're in France, what you can tell us about your kind of Plus experience or what the project is about or anything. But if you can't give us any details, can you at least, because everybody here is interested in the transcultural trip that everybody's trying to connect with other countries for markets and for talent and everything. So can you evoke what's new and different and exciting or good and bad about working with a foreign country?
With Fabrice and Dominique.
Well, I want to say, firstly, that I'm enjoying the experience of working with Canal Plus, and that's what I want them to hear from this, and anything else I say is not me talking. It's poor translation. I think that the big difference is the one thing that makes all the differences, and that is that the French networks are less able or less confident about a new project without seeing a lot of scripts. In comparison to the system that operates in Great Britain and the United States, where a brand new series is greenlit to production off a single script or a single filmed pilot. In the UK, we tend not to make drama pilots, it's very rare. So you are getting a series commitment to production of millions of euro based on a piece of work that has cost them a few €1,000. In France, as I'm beginning to understand, the situation is that you need to have several scripts and a clear outline of the arc of the whole series before anyone will commit the money to production. So they will green light a series, and which is the situation I'm in with Canal, that we're a greenlit show, but we have yet to reach an agreement on a production schedule because they want further reassurances about the content of the show. That's something that I'm not used to doing, but having said that, I really like the project, and I think it's going to be a very good project. So ultimately, I think it will be worth it.
Can you tell us about the content?
Correct, yeah, la patrouille peut-il. It's a First World War sci-fi series.
It's in the press in France, so you can talk about it.
I will talk about it. Yeah, it's a First World War science fiction series, and it's based around mysterious events on the battlefield in 1916, which then propel the characters into what appears to be an investigation into a new German weapon, but actually the strong science fiction elements come into the story as it moves forward. It's not possible to say more about it than that because it's full of twists and surprises and mysteries, and also I haven't figured them out yet.
But it's your invention, the story proposal.
Yes, I've created the show, and I'm working with some other writers on the project now. But at the moment the position is that I'm creating and show running the show.
Can you tell us about the language?
Yes, fortunately it's in English. Sorry?
It will be done in France?
Yes, it's going to. The series is going to be shot. Well, we haven't decided where it's going to be shot. It will be shot somewhere in Europe, but it's It's a Canal Plus production, and the series will be performed in English and then will be available for the domestic French audience, either dubbed or subtitled into French. That's the plan at the moment, but the majority of the characters are French. I don't know if any of you saw Crossing the Lines that was screened earlier today, which I watched and enjoyed, and I was very interested in the discussion afterwards about the way in which all those different nationalities were blended, but the language of the show was English, and I think it was very interesting watching that, because as a native English speaker, you're only really accustomed to watching native English speakers perform drama, or it's something like Engrenage, which is subtitled, or the Danish, the Scandinavian shows like The Bridge and The Killing, which is subtitled. And one of the big issues with Lost Patrol is how the show will play to an Anglophone audience. What accents the characters employ, and the characters who are French speaking English. And I was fascinated watching Crossing the Lines, about thinking, someone just said ça va, and then the next thing they say is in English. What language are they really speaking there? And actually you get swept along with the drama, and you stop thinking about it. But it's an interesting question in international drama that's made in English.
I have a quick question. How do you immerse yourself in the subject that you choose to develop as a TV series? Because you've moved from bodies to a police TV series, and now a more historical. Did you work with, I read on the net, you worked with retired cops for Line of Duties. I myself worked on a police TV series, and I immersed myself in some cops because I'm no cop. So I was just interested by how you developed.
The idea really came originally from real cases, that in studying real cases that were in the news, I developed an understanding of how certain things worked in the area of policing that I wanted to dramatise. But when we moved forward into the series, we encountered problems with having police advisors, that we didn't get official cooperation from the police because they felt that the subject matter was uncomplimentary to the police. The incident at the beginning where an innocent man is shot by counter-terrorism officers was based in part on a real incident that happened in London, where an innocent man was shot by the London police. We sent the script to the London police, and they said we would never do anything like that, so we're not going to support the show. And that put us in a very difficult position, and a lot of the research was done with anonymous contributions. The second series has been different. After the first series went out, an old school friend contacted me via Facebook to tell me that he was now a police officer and a fan of the show, and we started corresponding, and he's become my secret advisor. So he's given me a lot of inside information anonymously.
The NSA knows who he is.
And if they're monitoring Facebook, there are things that would worry me more than that.
Yeah, from a music composer point of view, the music is a very important element in the series, and I wanted to know how you approach that with the composer.
Yeah, just before we made Line of Duty, I was involved making a single film for television, and we were lucky enough to work with the composer Clint Mansell on that, who's from the same part of the country as I am, obviously known for his work on things like Black Swan, but he knew of the United story, which is the story of the Munich air disaster and the Busby Babes, and he kindly came on board and wrote a fantastic score for us. And through him, he introduced me to his keyboard player when he plays live as a keyboard player called Paradis. And we were looking at various composers. Jed and I listened to various people, we met people. And Carly just went away and wrote some little test pieces of music to picture, and we were immediately grabbed by them. So she had virtually no TV drama experience. I think she'd scored one series in that. But she was obviously a really talented musician, and she immediately, it felt different. It didn't feel like a sort of samey thriller score. It felt like she was doing something, and I could see Clint's influence on her as well. And then we got her on board, and then Jed and I and the director would work with her through each of the episodes. And again, it was useful. We got her involved very early in the process. I think sometimes composers are brought in too late, by which time there's very little they can do, and they end up just sort of matching the temp score that you've whacked on. Whereas I think even in our early cuts, I recall we had large chunks of Carly's own music.
Yeah, what really interested me about the composer as well was the fact that she'd done so little, but she was incredibly enthusiastic and hardworking and obviously talented. And you know, I remember that I got my break in TV because people were prepared to take a chance on me. I'd written nothing, but they said have an opportunity, and I think it's great working with people who are breaking into the industry. That you get a kind of enthusiasm that you don't get sometimes from people who've done a lot of work. And the problem with composers, the best ones, the most experienced ones, is that they're so busy. So even though you give them a lot of time to do the work, they end up delivering it so bloody late that you've got nothing you can do. You're stuck with a piece of music that doesn't work. And then you have to go back to them with notes. Sometimes you end up having to make do with the old guide tracks. And actually, this particular composer gave us the opportunity to work in the way that we wanted, which was that the music started being delivered before we were picture locked. And so we had an idea of what the score would sound like. Rather than picture locking and then the music having to fit, there were times when we had guide tracks that were so similar to what we eventually got that we could cut to the music. And then just before we did the final mix, Carly would make some changes just to make sure that the music diminished during dialogue, so that we could still have the music could still have a strong presence, but we could hear the dialogue. So I thought in many ways it was an ideal process.
I want to know what was the audience of the live on YouTube.
The audience, BBC.
4 million viewers.
Consolidated, yeah.
Alors, j'ai été rappelé à l'ordre par Marie Baraco qui est juste là. Je voudrais remercier Jed et Simon pour être venus nous raconter leur expérience sur la série. Et je vous reconseille de regarder la saison 1 avec des sous-titres, si vous ne comprenez pas l'anglais, avec de meilleurs sous-titres que ceux qu'on a eus, parce qu'ils ne rendent pas hommage à l'écriture de Jed, notamment pour les vannes. C'est un peu raté, il y a pas mal de choses qu'on n'arrive pas à choper en français, mais encore merci pour être venu, j'espère que vous avez passé un excellent festival, et puis merci pour ce show, parce que c'est vraiment, ça déchire, c'est vraiment chouette, merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.